you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Switch gears, and I swear, the plan every time that I prepare an Aaron Torres pod is not always to talk about Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, and Colorado football. But then a funny thing happens. The man is a content machine, and he just creates narratives whether we intend to talk about him or not. And so I bring it up. This is now the third time in 4 episodes that we're talking Colorado, but how can we not after the week that has unfolded over the last couple days? And if you listen to Monday's Aaron Torres pod, you know, like we did talk a little bit about the spring game on Monday's show. We hit on a lot of different things, you know, the stuff that you would expect. How did the team look? Shedeur Sanders, his son, the quarterback. We talked about the offense. We talked about the show, the spectacle that was Colorado spring football. But at the same time, we also talked about a couple of different guys, including a player named Montana Lemonious Craig. If you remember that name, he was the spring game MVP for Colorado. He had 2 touchdowns, had about 150 yards receiving. He was all over SportsCenter and social media. And oh my God, this is the breakout star of spring football. Robert Griffin III is raving about him. And so I bring it up because after the spring game, we started to sit there and say, well, wait a second now. Yeah, this team is going to be about who Coach Prime brings in the portal and who Coach Prime brings out of the high school ranks. But there might actually be some players left over that can contribute this coming season. So what happened? Of course, literally about an hour after I hit publish on Monday's episode, log into social media. What do you see? Montana Lemonious Craig, MVP of Colorado spring game. He's hitting the transfer portal. And for those of you who thought it was a one-off weird deal, what does it mean? Apparently not that much. Because how about this? As I record here on Tuesday night, it's about 7 o'clock Eastern time. Colorado has had 22, first of all, 18 players have entered the transfer portal on Monday. I believe the total is 22 as I recorded. I'm sure it's going up since the spring game on Saturday. So unbelievably, just since the spring game ended, we're talking about a quarter of the roster, assuming they had 85 scholarship players, which they didn't. A quarter of the roster has already hit the portal. Oh, by the way, in total, the number is somewhere in about the 33-person range to hit the portal since April 15th, not that long ago. And the total is well over 40, about 45 or 46 players who have entered the transfer portal since Coach Prime took over in December. And so I bring it up because what did I just tell you a minute ago? This man is an absolute content machine. And I got to be honest, I think the most fascinating question in college football right now, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? And what is this going to look like at Colorado over the next 4 or 5 months? Now, in terms of why, I think there's 2 solid camps. There's like one camp that's like, this is what you need to do. There's another camp that's like, I don't know, whatever. So let's get into both sides. And let me start with the side that's very pro, hey, get these kids out of here. And part of the like the argument for this is what Coach Prime has to do, I think it really rests on a couple things. One, Colorado wasn't very good last year. Colorado was 1-11. And I think most people kind of just sit there and say, well, if they were 1-11, they weren't very good. They don't have very many ball players. They don't have very many dudes. Clean out the house, start over, bring in guys that are difference makers. And if that's your argument, I can't really argue with it. 1-11, but how about this? They weren't just bad. They were like abominable pretty much everywhere, okay? I looked it up just to make sure I remembered correctly. They finished, how about this? 127th out of 131 teams in scoring. So 127 out of 131, they averaged about 15.5 points per game. 15.5 points per game in the modern spread tempo world. They also, by the way, finished second to last in college football, last in the Power 5 in total defense. So it wasn't just one position. It wasn't the run game or the pass defense or the run defense. They were pretty much universally terrible across the board. So that's the first argument as to why you get rid of clean house. Whatever. You're 1-11. Everybody's terrible. Get them out. Bring in guys that can make a difference. The second thing that I think stands out in terms of why this sort of makes sense and why I get it is that, like, Coach Prime literally said this was coming. Like that, hey, some of y'all got to get in the portal. And I've talked many times about the speech that he made when he accepted the job in December. I'm bringing my own luggage and it's Louis. But here's the thing. I'm not even talking about that speech when I talk about Coach Prime, and I talk about, I talk about the idea of him discussing publicly the need for some of y'all to get out of here. Because here's the thing. On Tuesday, maybe Monday, I don't even know, we got film of Coach Prime's pregame spring speech on Saturday. And you know what he basically said? He said, some of you guys have fun because you're not going to be here on Monday. Here is the exact quote from Deion Sanders to his team before the game. He said, some of you stop this false sense of reality that you think you're at. Ask your coach. I want everybody to stop by their coach's office or on the field. Coaches, give them a minute of peace. I want you to ask them, give them a minute apiece, I should say. I want you to ask them, Coach, where do I sit? And I want you to be honest, not to hurt their feelings, because I don't believe in that. I don't want to hurt their feelings. Just let's be honest. If I'm not honest and it hurts your feelings, that's on you. That's not on me. I have to be honest. That's my deal with God. And so, first of all, I've said this many times, like credit Coach Prime, right? Like this is the world we live in. And I have much less sympathy about all of this now because this is big boy college football. And I've been told for years it's a business. And I've been told for years that the players need to treat it like a business and the players need to do what's best for them. And they should be able to transfer when they don't want to, when they're not happy. And that's fine. I'm told the players need to cut of the pie, and they do. They deserve it. But if we're going to professionalize college sports, and if we're going to give the players more money, which they deserve, and if we're going to allow them to leave when they want, let's also have an honest conversation about the opposite spectrum, which is you're now getting paid something, most of you. And on top of it, you can leave whenever you want. So if it works that way, it's got to work the other way too. And I give Coach Prime credit for just being so honest about it. And so why I can't freak out about 40 plus players hitting the portal on Monday and Tuesday, well, 40 plus over the course of his 4 months on the job, is because this is all very clearly part of his plan. Maybe one or two guys he would have liked to see stay, but for the most part, he told them before the spring game, y'all got to get out of here. So there's that part of it. And the other part that I keep going back to, and when Coach Prime got hired, I talked about this a lot, is that I do think, I remember talking about this when he got hired. Like, for everybody that thinks, oh, this is so crazy, this is exactly what Coach Prime did at Jackson State. And I've said it before, but Barstool Sports did a very good documentary following Coach Prime around his first year at Jackson State. I watched most of it, and I remember watching it, and it was jarring because he did this exact same thing when he got to Jackson State. There was just not as many people paying attention. And he basically walked in the first meeting. He said, y'all weren't very good. Some of y'all aren't committed to football. Some of y'all too busy chasing girls, doing this, doing that, partying, having a good time. We're about football in this building, and we're focused on football. And those of you that don't fall in line with me, you got to get the heck out of here. He did it at Jackson State. There just weren't as many cameras. People weren't watching as closely, but they're watching now. And that's why I can't have a problem with it, because he has a plan, and it worked at Jackson State. As I've said many times, last 2 years, he was 23-3 as the head coach at Jackson State. At the same time, I will say, this is some high risk, high reward stuff here. And it's only fair if I'm going to criticize, if I'm going to credit or at least acknowledge the part where, hey, some of these guys just aren't good enough. I also got to acknowledge this is a very dangerous game. And let me explain why. It really, the only reason that I'm sort of against this kind of wholesale change, it's just a numbers game, right? Like college football, more than maybe any other sport, it's a numbers game. Everyone gets 85 scholarships. You know how in college basketball, sometimes now in this portal era, most schools don't even fill all 13 scholarships. They'll have 10 or 11 guys. College football, you need all 85 of those bodies. And I just don't, are you going to be able to get enough high quality bodies in before the end of this portal cycle, before the end of the summer, in time for fall camp? And I understand that they've signed 1 million transfers and they're bringing in a pretty extensive high school and junior college class. But I look across college football. Numbers are the key to everything. Filling out all 85 of those scholarships just to have bodies for practice, just to have bodies when injuries inevitably hit. Like, this is an important part of college football history. Like, you look at certain teams right now. I'll give you an example. Texas A&M. I know everybody likes to crush Jimbo Fisher, and he's terrible and he's the worst. What I can tell you is their first 22 this year is about as good as anybody's in college football. Not saying they're going to beat Alabama, not saying they're going to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. That first 22 is really good, though. The problem with A&M is obviously the offense, but then two, they don't have much depth, and A&M fans will tell you that. Like, we need bodies. I was thinking about this. Remember when Lane Kiffin took over at USC and Pete Carroll had been the head coach and they were great forever, and then they got crushed by scholarship sanctions? What ended up happening? The frontline guys were good. Go back to look at those USC teams. Matt Barkley, Robert Woods, Marquise Lee. They had a lot of really good players. They just didn't have enough bodies, and by the end of the year, they got worn down. Now, I understand there's a difference between USC coming out of the Pete Carroll era versus Colorado coming out of the Carl Durrell era. But that's what worries me, and I understand the portal's in play, but I'm here to tell you, I follow this portal stuff, man. I don't know if there's enough difference-making dudes to fill out this roster. Like even if you get a disproportional amount of them, even if you do, look, like it's going to be hard to find guys that are good enough to play at this level, and enough of them. Because remember, first of all, you're not going to get everybody. I mean, the same guys that you want, probably pretty much everybody else does. Alabama has holes to plug. USC does. UCLA does. Oregon does. Washington does. Whatever. But two, even if you get a disproportional amount of them, there's just not that many impact players in the portal right now. Trust me, I'm following this thing as closely as anybody. We have our transfer portal tracker at AaronTorresOnline.com. I mean, the number of like difference-making dudes, it's just not that many. And so I look at this and I'm fascinated to see how it all unfolds. Because do I believe Coach Prime can eventually get to like 85 scholarships? Yeah. Do I think they're probably going to be better than people think next year? I really do. But this is some high risk, high reward, as we have what? What did I say? 45, 46, 47 players now in the portal from Colorado.